All right, good morning. So it looks like our participants are slowly starting to level out, and I think we've got just about everybody in this morning. Welcome to our second webinar in the Florida Friendly Landscaping Green Stormwater Infrastructure webinar series hosted by the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program. This webinar will be available to everyone online along with the rest of our webinar series, and we will provide a link in the chat box as we move along with our presentations. Today's webinar is specifically on funding for green stormwater infrastructure, and we have a series of experts from the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, including Nathan Jagoda from the Non-Point Source Pollution Management Grants, Michael Chase with Clean Water State Revolving Funds Loan Program, Eddie Buza with Resilient Florida Grants, and Michael Barr with the Springs Restoration Grant Funding. Links to all of our grants and loans can be found on the Green Stormwater Infrastructure website, which I will also drop the link to that in the chat box as soon as we get started. Next month, our third webinar is on April 13th, and we will be focusing on tree boxes and suspended concrete systems. You can expect to receive an overview of design, plant selection, available technology, and the maintenance considerations for those types of green stormwater infrastructure. To see our full lineup of webinars, including our recorded webinars and future webinars that you can still register for, you can visit floridafriendlylandscaping.com and find links to all of our trainings and other FFL webinars on other topics. That too will be in the chat box for your convenience. Today's webinar does have CEU credits available for 1.5 hours, and those are for the Florida Friendly Landscaping Certified Professionals, FNGLA credits, floodplain managers, professional engineers, and landscape architects. That link as well, I will drop in the chat. And if you have questions or concerns, you can reach out to Claire Lewis, and I will provide you her contact information. If you have questions during today's presentations, please submit them to the Q&A box and not the chat. That's the best way to make sure that our moderators will be able to see your question and make sure that those get to our speakers. We will have time after each presentation for questions. If we don't get to your question, we will make sure to bring it up at the end of all of the presentations. And if for some reason we don't get to your question at all, we'll do our best to reach out and make sure you get those answers. Without further ado, though, that will bring us into our first presentation with Nathan on green stormwater infrastructure funding in non-point source grants.
Thanks, Emily. Let me just go ahead and share my screen really quick. Okay, just want to make sure everyone can see that. Alrighty. So yeah, thanks, Emily. My name is Nathan Jagoda. Today I'm going to be talking about our grants that we offer here in the Non-Point Source Management Program at the Department of Environmental Protection. Within our non-point program, we have 2 grants that we offer. We offer our 319 federal grants from the US EPA, as well as our SWAG grants, State Water Quality Assistance grants that come from the state of Florida. So the first grant I'm going to discuss today is our 319 grant. And I'll just start by saying with both of these grants, we're very eager to fund green stormwater infrastructure. We are also able to fund gray infrastructure. So we can fund 2 different types of projects, but we are always eager and excited when we get GSI proposals in. So I'm going to start with our federal grant, our 319H grant. So our 319H grant comes from the US EPA. And we can cover construction, education, and monitoring with this grant funding. With our 319H grant, we do have a 40% match requirement. However, grantees may use state grants and loans, such as our SRF loan that will be discussed today, to meet that match requirement. Our 319 grant award can take a little bit more time to receive when compared to our SWAG award. So not always immediately shovel-ready projects with the 319H grant. Sometimes we can have a little bit of time between the grant award and actually receiving those funds. So there can be a little time for planning, finishing up all that. And then other types, in addition to green stormwater infrastructure, other types of projects we commonly fund with 319H are water quality improvement projects, groundwater protection projects, water quality restoration projects, stormwater BMPs, non-point education, as well as septic to sewer projects. So next I'm going to jump into our SWAG grant, which is our State Water Quality Assistance Grant. So this one is coming from the state of Florida. With this one, as I mentioned, with the 319H grant, typically a little bit of time between project selection and actual award. With the SWAG grant, it's a bit quicker of a timeline. So we typically look for shovel-ready projects with our SWAG grant. With this grant, we do not have a match requirement. However, match can help during our project selection process. So it's not required that you have that 40% match like the federal grant. However, if we see match when we're scoring our proposals, it can definitely help when it comes to project selection. And then similarly, monitoring is not required here, but it can help. We're always looking to obtain data on how our BMPs are performing. So we love to see monitoring in proposals, and it can definitely help when it comes to project selection for these. So again, as I mentioned, we are always very eager to fund green stormwater infrastructure with both grant types, but with the SWAG grant, we're also able to fund water quality improvement projects, groundwater protection projects, water quality restoration projects, stormwater BMPs, as well as reuse projects. So how to submit a proposal. In order to apply for our grants, grantees must be either local governments, special districts, or public universities. We use one proposal form for both of our grants, both 319 and the SWAG grant. You can apply for with one form. We try to make it easy for folks. So you can apply for both of them at once. You can apply for one or the other. And as we mentioned, you can use different funding sources to kind of leverage state funding as match for that federal 40% requirement. So maybe you got a SWAG grant, and then next year you want to apply for a 319H grant. You can use that SWAG grant as leverage, as match. So in order to find our grants and apply for them, you can either use the Protecting Florida Together portal, where you can find a variety of DEP grant opportunities. So you can view the open grants there as well as apply. You can also contact Connie Becker, who is our non-point grants coordinator. Do I have the email listed here? I'll provide her email at the end of my presentation. So Connie can help you determine eligible grant components, funding requirements, match requirements, and can help with any other questions you might have related to our grants out of non-point. Typically, we review projects twice per year. We do one solicitation in the spring and one in the fall. However, occasionally we do have kind of funding that hasn't been spent, or a project that maybe came in a little short. So sometimes we are able to award projects out of cycle. So we do accept proposals on a rolling basis. However, with that, there's no guarantee that your proposal will be reviewed out of cycle or funded out of cycle, but we do accept it in the event that we have a project either, with some leftover funding or just have leftover funding that we need to allocate. So if you want to submit out of cycle, you're more than welcome to contact Connie and get a proposal in. And if we don't end up reviewing out of cycle, we'll carry it over into our next cycle and it will be reviewed and considered then. And then one other initiative I just want to touch on before I pass it on to our next speaker is our GSI project inventory. I mentioned this during the first webinar of the series. So this inventory is our attempt here at Nonpoint to create an exhaustive list of GSI projects throughout the state. The list, once it's formalized, will be available on our GSI website. So here we're interested in collecting a wide variety of GSI projects throughout the state of Florida. They could have been constructed using local, state, federal, or private funding sources. They do not have to be funded by DEP to be included in our inventory. This will also be supplemental to our GSI website success stories page. So the success stories page will be used to highlight kind of, our most prime examples of green stormwater infrastructure projects throughout the state, but this inventory is an attempt to have an exhaustive list. That way folks can understand what BMPs are going in within the state, where they're located, what's going on in their region, and they can also take a look at the inventory to see projects that may be close to them if they're curious about going out in the field and seeing a project firsthand while they're designing their own projects. So how to submit projects. We currently have a questionnaire under development. It is so close to being done. It's kind of on those final stages of review. And then once that is public, it'll be available on our GSI website. And I'll also try to, when I do future presentations, make sure folks know and can provide the link through email as well. However, that is still under development, but like I mentioned, it's very, very close to being ready for y'all. So as you have here, will be available early 2023, very close to being ready. So in the meantime, you can reach out to me. My email's here on the screen with any questions regarding the inventory, or if you're, have some projects that you want to submit early before that questionnaire is ready, that's totally cool too. But just wanted to provide a reminder that we are working on this initiative, and we hope to make it an exhaustive list and really grow it to represent all of the GSI projects in the state. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions. Here is Connie Becker, our non-point source grant coordinator, contact information, as well as my contact information if you have any questions about that GSI inventory. Then here at the bottom of the screen, you can also find a link to the Green Stormwater Infrastructure website that we have created out of the non-point section here at the Department of Environmental Protection. So with that, if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to help answer.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nathan. So we did have one question about when the next submission for these grants is in September. And so Amanda did provide an answer in the chat. So for clarification, grants are accepted year-round, but there are 2 formal solicitation periods and review periods that happen in the fall and in the spring. So if you have a project that you're interested in, we would encourage you to reach out to Connie Becker. Her contact information Nate just had on the screen, and I also dropped it in the chat for your convenience. There's also a link to the non-point source webpage, and you can scroll down to the bottom of that and sign up for the division mailing announcement, and that actually will be the same mailing list for several of our speakers today, and so you'll be notified when there is a formal solicitation, and that's the best way to stay up to date. But of course, at any time, if you have a question about grants, we encourage you to reach out to Connie. All right, so I'm just looking at our questions. We have some comments. Monitoring is no longer required for 319 grants, and that was posed as a question. Nate, you want to take that one?
I'm sorry.
Is monitoring still required for 319?
Yeah, so we do still need monitoring for 319 grants. Yeah.
And are grants available to homeowner associations that have stormwater ponds?
So we can't award directly to a homeowners association. You would have to get with your local representative or local municipality to submit a proposal through them. So the grant would have to be awarded to that local municipality, and then the work could be done wherever that proposal was submitted for. So if it was in the neighborhood, it wouldn't be submitted on behalf of the homeowners association, rather on behalf of the municipality that it's within.
Thank you, Nate. So do projects have to be near impaired water bodies? We have several questions similar.
So not necessarily that they have to be, but it does help with our scoring process. We do give weight to projects that are located within BMAPs and RAPs. So being within those plans can help get some points when it comes to our proposal scoring, but we do award outside of those areas for sure. So I wouldn't want that to be discouraging to anyone. I would definitely still encourage you to submit the proposal. Yeah, so not a requirement, but it can help.
Do you have to be in identified water basins? I think that's a similar answer there.
Yeah, so kind of same answer for the most part. If you're in a BMAP or a RAP, it can help when it comes to proposal scoring, but we award outside of those areas, most definitely.
Mm-hmm. And then finally, we had a question regarding why we don't have clear deadlines, and I'll take this one, Nate, if that's all right. It has to do with the type of funding source that we have, and we have found that a rolling submission period provides the best opportunity for potential grantees, because we often have funding that becomes available in between those grant cycles, which is why we really try to encourage people, as soon as you have a project that you think would be eligible and you would like to submit for non-point source grant funding, please reach out to us and let us know, and let us begin that conversation, because that's going to be the most effective way to ensure that we're able to work together. Those two formal submission periods really come down to when we get our grant funding from EPA for the federal grant and what funding may be available from the state funding. So great question. We get that a lot. Unfortunately, this is kind of the way that we have to run these grants right now. All right. Any other questions for Nate or the non-point grant program? Okay, then we get to move on over to Michael Chase with the Clean Water State Revolving Loans Program.
Thanks for your time today, everyone.
Okay, thanks, Emily. As Emily stated, my name is Mike Chase. I'm with the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. Let's see. Hang on, trying to. What is the State Revolving Fund? Well, the Clean Water State Revolving Fund program funds infrastructure projects to improve public health, water quality, and promotes alternative water supply. We provide low interest loans for wastewater and stormwater projects. There is a grant component available for wastewater projects for small disadvantaged communities. There is not for stormwater projects. The fund revolves using loan repayments and investment earnings and bond proceeds. Fund's been around since 1988 or so, and we've funded over $6 billion in projects to date. We fund approximately $250 million in projects annually. It fluctuates a little bit. As I'll cover a little later, we've had a little bit of an influx of money with the bipartisan infrastructure law. So we'll get to that in a minute. Who's eligible? Well, local governments, counties, and municipalities are eligible. Also special taxing districts that are set up by those counties, municipalities, not so much municipalities, but the counties and state will set up special taxing districts for utilities that cover not so much a city limit, but more of a rural community type deal. So basically you have to have taxing authority to be eligible for SRF funds in the Clean Water Program. Non-governmental parties are eligible. This is more in the agricultural operations area, best management practices. Those projects, we haven't funded any of those projects that I'm aware of, but we're always looking. So if you have one, let me know. What are our loan terms? Generally, we give 20-year loans, 20-year terms. We can fund a 30-year loan for financially disadvantaged communities, provided that the infrastructure's useful life is at least 30 years. The repayments are semi-annual. They begin usually 6 months after completion of construction, but we can go up to a year. The finance rates are fixed upon the execution of the loan, which usually happens before the construction. So the loans are fixed throughout the duration of the loan. For the longest time, we've been at or near 0% loans, but with the way the interest rates are rising a little bit, we do have a small interest on the loans that we're currently processing. The interest rate will be based on the Thompson 20 bond geo index, which is basically 20 different bonds. They set a rate that kind of mirrors the federal rate. And we take an average of those 20 bonds every quarter and set our standard start rate. And then it's discounted based on the affordability index of the system, the community, the sponsor, and the population. The State Revolving Fund loan construction process. This is kind of a little spreadsheet, or not spreadsheet, but a visualization of our loan process. It looks pretty crowded and cumbersome, but it's really the sponsor responsibilities are the blue. It all starts with a request for inclusion. It's a simple form, 5 pages, I believe, that kind of outlines your project and how much you need and where you're starting. We can start at any phase. Basically, there are 3 phases to the project for the SRF: a planning phase, a design phase, and a construction phase. We can start at any portion. If the community wants to self-fund the planning and design, we can start with construction at SRF. We would have to approve the planning document and the design plans and specs before we could list them for construction, but we do it all the time. So you can start at any phase. Just covered that. Types of loans available: planning loan, design loan, construction loan. We can start anywhere, but they all start with a request for inclusion. Now, before I start with the bipartisan infrastructure law stuff, when the request for inclusion will get you in, it'll get a project manager assigned to you, and then that project manager will help shepherd you through the process of getting priority listed for the funding. We do have quarterly priority list hearings where we assign the projects. The project manager works you through the paperwork to get you on the list, to get all the approved paperwork ready. And then quarterly, we do have a priority list hearing where we allocate the funds to the projects. It starts in August. Our fiscal year, we're state fiscal year, but our first available hearing for the new dollars every year will be August. And that's usually our biggest hearing. And then we have them quarterly after the August hearing as funds are available. This year we had an August hearing, we had a November hearing. We did not have a February hearing, but we will have a May hearing. Now, the bipartisan infrastructure law has put some money into the SRF programs. I think everyone sees the 43 billion part and doesn't realize that that's for the entire country. Florida's allotment is around 275 million. Now that's spread among the water and wastewater SRF programs. The clean water SRF program, wastewater program last year it was about 60 million. This year it's going to be about 70 million. I think we'll average about 75 million in the clean water program over the 5-year period of extra quote unquote funding for clean water projects. The bill does prioritize disadvantaged communities. However, and there are principal forgiveness dollars available to small disadvantaged communities through the SRF, but stormwater projects are not eligible. There's also a requirement for prioritizing green projects. So we would certainly put those to the top of the list. All our clean water SRF rules and eligibilities apply. The projects will have to meet Build America, Buy America, unless they were conceived and started prior to May 14th, 2022. So we can get an adjustment period waiver if the plans and specs or the planning document was completed prior to May 14th. And this is a link to our Clean Water Program Manual. It has all the documents that you would need to work through the process, and it gives you a little outline of what to do, loan application, request for inclusion. I think we can provide this link in another form that may be more useful. I think you can Google Florida Clean Water SRF Program Manual, it'll pop up. And that's me, Mike Chase. The email address that I've put on there needs a dot between Michael and Chase, but all the other information is correct. That's all for me.
All right, so we do have a question. And if anybody else has questions, please submit them now. Can SRF be used for land acquisition?
It can if it's for the treatment. In other words, we can buy land for, say, a spray field, rapid infiltration basins, We cannot buy land for the treatment plant itself. We can buy land for stormwater ponds. We buy land for constructed wetlands, similar things like that, but we can. It's not, well, it's not principal forgiveness grant eligible, but we can buy it.
Thank you. And Mike, can you speak on how this loan may be able to be leveraged against some of the other grants we might hear about today?
Sure. We do it all the time. We co-fund with the Springs, certainly. We are able to with 319, especially with septic to sewer projects. We can co-fund with other funding agencies, USDA. What we can't do is every year we have to assign a certain amount of projects, a certain dollar amount of each project to what they're called a capitalization grant. That's how we get the federal dollars into the state. We can't fund federal projects or federal dollars with federal dollars. So, but I don't think any of that applies here. I'm not sure. So, but it would just be a matter of whatever portion of the project that you don't fund elsewhere, we can fund.
Thank you. Absolutely. So also to speak on the non-point side as well, you can use, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, we can, if somebody were to get a loan from you and start a process and start a project, if they were to then receive grants from non-point or Springs or some of our other funding sources, they can just cancel out that part of the loan. Is that correct? So
that's correct. Yes,
you only start with your loan and.
That's right. And you only pay back what you borrow. So, and you only borrow what you use. So if you start construction and you need 10 million and all of a sudden you get a $2 million grant, now you only need 8. That's all you ask, or all you use, all you get for in disbursements. We're on a reimbursement basis. So it's not, if you get a $10 million loan with us, we don't give you $10 million. We give you as you need. As you spend it, we reimburse you for it. So whatever you use, that's what your loan is with SRF.
Thank you so much. Any other questions for Michael Chase? All right. Up next, we have Eddie Buza with the Resilient Florida Grants.
All right. Sorry, I lost my mute button when I hit share. Hey, everybody. My name is Eddie Boza. I'm with the Resilient Florida program, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've got going on lately. Resilient Florida is a newer program that was established in 2021. If anybody is a policy wonk and follows legislation, there was a bill in 2021. It was called the Always Ready Bill. And it recognized that Florida is particularly vulnerable to sea level rise and the effects of increased flooding events and increased frequency and duration of storm events. And so these impacts kind of necessitate the state to address these, because these impacts can have an economic impact, social, environmental, and public safety challenges to the state. So the Resilient Florida program was created and it became law in 2021 on July 1st. A year went by and legislature recognized that there were some changes that needed to be made. The program kind of got stood up and getting staffed up, and actually had a grant opportunity available in the first year. And there were some definitions that were changed. We added some more eligible entities. The main entities for the grants are municipalities and counties, but we recognize that there are special districts that have the responsibility of maintenance of waterways, inlets, ports, any other kind of stormwater or special districts that have those responsibilities were added to be eligible for our grants. They also added water management districts and other districts that might have the responsibility to operate or maintain public water resources of the state. Added some more support for financially disadvantaged communities. And the biggest change, we also added some rainfall stuff. We do planning grants, which I'll talk about soon. But one of the biggest changes was when the program was first started, it was, we're going to spend money on this, but we're not going to spend more than 100 million on this per year. Well, in year 2, they flipped that and they said, actually, you can't spend less than 100 million. So that really sort of turned the ceiling into now what the floor is for the grants that we can award or propose. So the program is kind of made up of 5 different elements. We do planning grants. So communities have some planning requirements to qualify for future funding. So they've got to analyze their flood vulnerability or their vulnerability to sea level rise, utilizing some specific scenarios and standards and time horizons. And those are specifically NOAA's 2017, the intermediate high and intermediate low for 2040 and 2070. We do some grants to regional resilience entities to kind of help with a regional approach to provide technical assistance to their member communities or coordinate multi-jurisdictional assessments and to provide the technical assistance that's needed to propose projects or develop projects for inclusion in future opportunities. The program also established the Florida Flood Hub for Applied Science that's based out of USF. And that's sort of the research arm of the program. And some of the things that they're doing is they're developing Florida specific sea level rise scenarios. So the NOAA scenarios are very generalized for the eastern seaboard. And the Flood Hub is kind of validating NOAA's data for Florida, but also developing some Florida specific curves, if you will. They're also developing future rainfall projections. So if anybody's familiar with Atlas 14, we do have rainfall data from the past 30 to 50 years or so, and that can be used to analyze rainfall, but we don't have anything looking into the future. So the Flood Hub is also trying to do that. That's an effort alongside with USGS, and I know nationally they're looking at creating Atlas 15, but we're partnering with them to get Florida-specific rainfall future projections. The program is also developing a statewide flood vulnerability assessment. So we've collected a lot of data from local governments, from water management districts. There's publicly available data sets, state and federal sets that can help us identify critical assets across the state. And then we're working with the Flood Hub to develop that statewide flood assessment. And in future versions of our, what we call the statewide flooding and sea level rise resilience plan, I know it's a mouthful, but projects would either have to be identified in a local vulnerability assessment that is completed according to our standards, which again, we do provide grants for, or identified as vulnerable in the statewide assessment. So that's an ongoing effort right now. Sorry, my next button is being hidden. Some of the things that we've accomplished to date is in 2022, we developed a report that kind of took a broad look at flood resilience and mitigation efforts across the state. That was in coordination with the statewide Office of Resilience and the Chief Resilience Officer. We also developed the second preliminary statewide flooding and sea level rise resilience plan, which kind of outlines the whole process, how we advertised, how we evaluated projects, the score and the rank of, or I should say just the rank of all the projects that were submitted. We received about 270 applications for over $1.5 billion in funding last year. And that report was delivered to the legislature on December 1st, about 4 months ago, and is being considered for funding during this year's legislative session and the next year's budget. This is just a snapshot of some of the investments that not only the Resilient Florida program, but the Office of Resilience and Coastal Protection have made. We've done about $40 million in planning grants, which is actually increasing more towards 50 after this year's awards. We've granted $4 million to regional resilience entities for those coordinated efforts. Our Resilient Florida grant program had $500 million in its first 2 years from some COVID ARPA relief money. And actually 200 more, that's not shown here from this year, and 470 million for the statewide flooding and sea level rise resilience plan. So we're up over about $1 billion in grants so far in the first 2 years to our local communities to adapt and their critical assets to the flooding and sea level rise. We also like to tout some of the other areas of our office and coral restoration and the flood hub and other efforts of the Resilient Florida program, about $60 million there. So we will have another opportunity. It will open on July 1st, again, for those special districts and the municipalities and counties. And we'll accept applications until September 1st. And then we'll go through the process again of evaluating all the applications and developing another plan to submit to the legislature for next session's consideration and funding. So keep an eye out for that. We're also sort of doing a pre-application period. So you can get my information at the end of this presentation and I can share some resources with you, but we're making staff available to answer your questions. We're going to have a webinar series coming up in the next few months and sort of open office hours to actually talk about eligibility, see if your projects are good for our program, talk about the scoring criteria. And we also have entertained the idea of letting you submit an application before July 1st, and then you can get feedback from an evaluator on how that application could be improved so it can better position itself for funding. So there is a scoring process involved and it's outlined in rule. So the statute lays out some pretty broad percentages and tiers of scoring. And then the rule 62S-8 actually assigns point categories to each different thing. And I wanted to point out here that tier 2 has those environmental options, enhancing revegetation, natural enhancement, nature-based solutions or natural and nature-based features. We do have some, exceeding the minimum requirements, using innovative tech to reduce costs. So there's a lot of different things that you can score in. One of the main tiers is to address those risks to critical assets, and critical assets are anything from community facilities to natural and cultural and historical buildings or areas, critical infrastructure, stormwater, wastewater, or the actual emergency facilities. So things that you might, emergency operation centers, police stations, fire stations, and the like. So here's just sort of a quick look at the overview and distribution of projects in the first couple of years. Again, we're up around 400 or so grants, nearing about $1 billion. And we see some concentration in the Tampa Bay area and the Southeast area, and up in the Panhandle a little bit. So we want to sort of increase that distribution this year and really tap into some of those other communities. It rains everywhere, and where it rains, it can flood. Quick overview of some of the distribution of the projects in the 22-23 state plan. We had about 76 projects for $270 million. And you can see stormwater infrastructure was the top biller there. About 40% of our projects have stormwater involved. We've got transportation evacuation routes, other adaptations to critical infrastructure. So these could be conveyance systems or water, wastewater lines. We did do some septic to sewer conversions. We've got natural systems restoration, things like living shorelines for erosion control. Again, restoration and revegetation, critical buildings. So we can actually pay to elevate generators, relocate facilities out of the way of harm. And then we do have a little bit of gray infrastructure in some parts of the state. It's just needed for that protection. And then overall, here's just overall to date that nearly $1.1 billion or so. Again, stormwater takes that top bill. So I think this is a good group to engage with that. And then utilizing those natural or nature-based features helps you in the scoring criteria, which helps you get, to the top of the list. So that was really broad stroke. I mean, this presentation, I pared it down a lot for this presentation. It's normally about an hour long. I can go in depth in each one of those different areas of the program and tell you more, but we will be having webinars in the run up to July 1st, and we invite you to participate in those. You can reach out to me here and I can share that information with you. There's also information on our website.
Thank you so much, Eddie. Do you have a mailing list for when those webinars will be announced?
We do, and the best thing to do is to go to DEP or floridadep.gov. I think it's /subscribe. And if you subscribe to DEP's you'll get an opportunity to choose what you want to subscribe to. We're all the way at the bottom, and you can just follow our program, and anything that we send out will go through that. You can also just email me separately, and I can send you a quick link to do that.
Great, thank you so much. And we do have some questions for Eddie, but if anybody else has questions, please submit them now. So first one, is it possible to receive a grant to prepare a vulnerability study for a city?
Yes, it's possible and highly recommended. And we're actually been charged in Executive Order 2023-6, I believe. The Chief Resilience Officer is given the task of ensuring that every municipality and county has a vulnerability assessment that meets our requirements. And that's what about that $50 million in planning is for. And we'll have another opportunity again beginning July 1st to submit for a planning grant for vulnerability assessments. We've developed a standard scope of work for conducting those assessments, and something that you can, a local government can hand over to a contractor and say, we want to do this, tell us how much it's going to cost, and we have confidence that if you do this, what we're providing to you, you will come out of the other side meeting the statute. It's actually an eligibility requirement too. So for when we open the portal next summer, you will have to have completed a vulnerability assessment that shows a flood risk in order to receive funding. So in the first couple of years, we're pretty flexible. We've been doing a lot of grants. If there's some kind of assessment or report that there's a risk, but starting next year, it's a requirement to have conducted that study. And that's why we're putting so much money into the funding for it.
So thank you so much. Next question. If a project is identified after a local vulnerability assessment is finalized, is there a way to is there a process to amend the vulnerability assessment to include additional projects in order to be eligible to apply for implementation grants in the future?
Yeah, so we have funded planning grants again to update an existing assessment to meet the standards in the statute. So that fits into our planning grant category. You wouldn't necessarily update the assessment. You would want to develop the adaptation plan, which you might want to then address what projects. We don't see a lot of projects identified in vulnerability assessments. We see areas that are shown at risk with critical assets, and then we also fund the adaptation plan portion where the community kind of decides what's important to them. We don't like to decide what gets funding over another thing in a certain municipality. Things in St. Augustine, like cultural or historical resources, may be more important to that area, whereas shoreline conditions maybe in the Panhandle are more important, and Southeast Florida, maybe it's emergency facilities or have you. So yeah, we can definitely fund those studies and help you get those assessments where you want them to be.
Thank you. And then final question, if you don't have a vulnerability assessment, can you apply for implementation funding, or do you have to wait until the assessment is completed and approved by the state?
Yeah, so again, this year is going to be the last year that as long as you have some kind of assessment, report, evaluation, you can apply for funding this year without that assessment being complete. And we've even seen people spin up an engineer's certification or letter that has said, I've evaluated the site conditions and compared to the flood maps and basic modeling, publicly available open source modeling, and this site is at risk, and we're okay with that, at least for this cycle as well. So next year it'll become a requirement. We're also aware that some people are still working on their assessments. We just did another round of planning grants, and they may not even be done by July next year. So we're planning to try to figure out that puzzle as well, where we've funded efforts. They might not be complete. They might not meet the full letter of the statute, but we're going to find ways that we can include as much as we can so that we can help our communities adapt.
Thank you so much. If there are not any other questions for Eddie at this time, our final speaker is Michael Barr.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Emily, and thank you to the Non-Point program and UFFL for putting this on and for inviting me. So I'm here to talk about the Springs Grant Funding Program. I'm Michael Barr. I'm the administrator for the Springs and Watershed Restoration Program. So I'll just get right into it. So a little about the Springs Grant. It's an annual appropriation, typically around $50 million, but last year we were awarded $75 million. So we were excited to be able to do a little bit extra last year. Eligible projects are land acquisition and capital projects that protect springs areas, water quality and water quantity. So cost share programs for implementing agricultural BMPs, septic to sewer conversion projects, and advanced waste treatment facility upgrades to address wastewater contributions, water conservation projects, hydrological restoration, stormwater projects to address urban fertilizer and other nitrate contributions in springs areas, where we would love to see more green infrastructure LID components to those types of projects. And then kind of a catch-all other types of water quality and quantity projects. So the submittal process. You'll first submit proposals for projects to your local water management district. So there would be your first line of contact for this grant program. Each water management district has their own schedule for their solicitation, usually late fall to early winter. So they've collected their projects for this coming year and are evaluating those now, which will go through their internal process, their governing board, and then be open for public comment. And then once they're done with that, they'll submit to DEP in early May. So once it comes to us, it'll go through our internal review process. We'll consolidate a list and open that up for public comment. And then it'll be reviewed by my program and division, as well as subject matter experts from other parts of the department. And then final recommendations will be sent to the governor's office. Factors considered during evaluation: nutrient reductions, specifically nitrogen contributions to springs, whether the project is addressing BMAP goals, water savings. We look at the cost sharing or match. It's not going to be a required match, but we do look at the local contributions when evaluating projects. Readiness to proceed. So we're looking for shovel-ready projects, and then proximity to the priority focus areas, which are the sub areas within a BMAP, where land use activities will most impact aquifers and springs. So last year we got our award announcement in early December 2022. At which point we began reaching out to the recipients to enter into grant agreements. And that's it. Thank you. And if there's any other questions, I'll put these the contact information and links in the chat.
Thank you so much, Michael. Do we have any questions for Michael or for any of our other speakers today? All right, I'm not seeing anything coming in. So thank you so much to all of our speakers. We really appreciate you being here with us today. And I know some folks joined late, so as a reminder, this presentation is available for CEU credits for Florida-friendly landscaping certified professionals, FNGLA credits, floodplain managers, professional engineers, and landscape architects. If you need that link, you can find it in the chat, and I will repost it here in a second. You can also reach out to our Florida-friendly landscaping program contact, Claire Lewis. Her contact information is also in the chat. And all of the grant information can be found at our website at gsi.floridadep.gov. You can also find a lot of other useful information regarding green stormwater infrastructure. Our next presentation will be April 13th, where we will be focusing on tree boxes and suspended concrete systems. And we will have some technical experts available and on our presenter list who will talk about design, plant selection, available technology, and maintenance considerations for these types of systems. The webinar is available online at floridafriendlylandscaping.com. That link I'll also repost in the chat. And if you would like a copy of these presentations, you can email me at emily.lang@floridadep.gov. I am not seeing any other questions popping. Oh, I do one more question. The presenter from last month for Cocoa Beach Minuteman Causeway was Jessica, and she will be back with us next month. I don't think she is on today, though. So please let me know if you need her contact information, or you may be able to get to speak with her next month. All right, any other questions? We can definitely hang out for a second. But thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today.